I'm Dr. Vanessa LaPointe. I'm a registered psychologist, parenting educator, and mom to 2 growing boys, and this is Ask Dr. V. This week's question comes to us from Stephanie, and it goes like this. Dear Dr. Vanessa, I'm a working mom of 2 young boys. I've always wanted to be a mother, and I love my boys so much. The trouble is that I find at the end of the day, I'm so tired that I don't know I have anything left to give. I find myself getting exasperated over their behavior, and sometimes I realize that I'm counting down the minutes until bedtime. My husband tells me to get out of the house to take a break, but I feel guilty leaving them when I know they've only been home with me for a couple of hours. How can I make the most of the time that we have together without feeling like I'm going to snap? And how do I deal with these feelings of guilt when I know that I'm not doing them any good by being grumpy mommy when we are together? Sincerely, Stephanie. This conversation and question takes us sort of deep into the topic of self-care and really wondering, how do we be our best selves as parents so that we can really show up for our whole lives, not just in role as mom or dad, but also in all the very many other things that we take on in our day-to-day lives. And in exploring that topic, I'm actually bringing you Ask Dr. V from an interesting kind of location this week, where I also happen to be exploring the topic of self-care and how do I put that to work in my own life. You see, as it turns out, for the very first time, I found myself without my children for the entire spring break this year. This is not something that I'm used to. It's not something that I would want at all. I love having time with my boys, and they were off on an adventure with their father to a third world country with backpacks on their backs for 17 long days. So I had to figure out what was I going to do for myself during that time period in order to continue to show up as a person, as their mom, and as my best self, so that the energy that I was creating around me for them and for their dad as they're off traveling and adventuring together is the kind of energy that actually works for our family rather than against it. And so what I decided to do is, while my children are off adventuring, I decided to head off adventuring and bought myself a last-minute plane ticket to a beach in Hawaii. And here I sit deep in this world of self-care and really kind of making that come alive for me and making sense of what it is that we need as parents in order to show up as our best selves. First time in my adult life that I've done a solo vacation. And so as we think about the question that you've asked, Stephanie, and really wanting to make that make sense for you and come alive for you in your life, I want to offer you 3 things. The first is to know that underneath the surface of all of these feelings that you have of guilt and frustration and impatience in your role as mom, there is a program operating. None of this is real. You see, every single stimulus in our environment, every single experience that we have, every single thing that's going on around us is neutral. It has no meaning until we give it meaning. And so if you are finding that you are in that sort of state of mind where things are feeling overwhelming and you feel exhausted and your kids are making you crazy, that is not your reality. That is your story about your reality. And that story comes from deep inside of you. It's part of your programming. It probably was actually laid down in your psyche in the first 5 or 6 years of your life while you were growing and your mind was being formed. And now that story, that program has come forward into your adult life with you. And it's sort of creeping up in different ways. And one of the ways that you're landing on is how it is presenting in your role as a mother. But again, none of that is real. So try to think about, how do you go in under the surface and make sense of your program? For example, if you're feeling guilt, is it because somewhere in your history you learned as a young girl that you actually have to perform in order to receive love, or that you have to be good enough in order to be worthy? And are these sort of subconscious programs still finding their way into your present day life, which has you reacting strongly and feeling overwhelmed if you think that you're not doing things good enough in your role as mom? So number 1, think about what is your program. Number two, think about the idea of living with purpose. And I wonder if you're finding that you're coming home from work really depleted because you're not living with purpose when you head off to your paid employment outside the home. And so you feel that it's draining you rather than filling you up. When we're able to head off to our vocation rather than heading off to our job, when we're able to really think about actualizing our dharma rather than just going to work every day, that kind of activity, although it may be tiring physically and mentally, it doesn't exhaust us. So I would invite you to think about, are you living life with purpose? And then the final thing would be that I would encourage you to think about all of this as being perfect. You see, nothing in the universe is random, which means that this experience and these emotions and all of the things that are happening for you are happening for a reason. What is that reason? I have no idea, but I do know that there's gold in this for you, Stephanie. There's gold to be mined and gifts that exist in all of this for you. Nothing is random. It all happens for you. It's not happening to you. So think about the idea that even when you're struggling, you can kind of have this like higher self version of you looking down at your mind and recognizing, wow, this moment is actually perfect. This is what is supposed to be happening in my life right now so that I can become the best version of myself. And as you can see the background, this is where I get to explore self-care from. Carl Jung is famous for having said that the greatest burden our children will ever carry is the unlived lives of their parents. And so it really is upon us to make sure that we are mindful about our practices in terms of self-care, that we recognize when we can be self-full, it makes us selfless rather than selfish. And that really is the goal. That's what we want our children to marinate in. That's the energy and the environment that we want all around them. The environment that is going to indeed form their minds, as Dr. Dan Siegel says. And so, Stephanie, this is about you. This is a wonderful gift presenting in your life. This is why you're struggling with these emotions and these feelings alongside your role as mom and figuring out how are you going to be the best version of yourself. And it all comes down to going under the surface, to being introspective, to really exploring what is in this for you and how are you going to make sense of that, and how do you create space and time in your mind, even if on the outside of you you feel like there are certain concretes that aren't changeable. I would invite you to go to the inside and understand what is changeable. And what's changeable is your mind, what's changeable is your program, what's changeable is the story that you have running underneath all of this. And so there you have it. And remember, Stephanie, you've got this.